Welcome, Josh. Hi. So, everyone, today we have Dr. Josh Lessing. Josh is one of the world's leading minds on developing robotics and AI systems for the food industry, previously serving as the Director of Research and Development at Soft Robotics Inc. and the CEO of Root AI. He now serves as the CTO of AppHarvest, where he's combining advanced robotics, AI, and enterprise cloud to unlock new possibilities in the world of sustainable agriculture. Josh was a postdoctoral fellow in materials science and robotics at Harvard University, having earned his PhD studying biophysics and physical chemistry at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology and received a Bachelor of Science in Chemistry from Brown University. Welcome, Josh, and thank you for being with us today. Um, so my first question to you, it's going to be a fireside chat. So we're just going to be it's going to flow and we're going to have a couple of questions and then the audience can serve their own questions in the chat. So how did you get into your field? Can you tell us a little bit about App Harvest and your AI and machine learning revolution in the agricultural sector?
Oh, fantastic. Thank you, first of all, for having me. How did I get into my field? I think it was completely by accident. For my background, I was a chemist, biophysicist, spectroscopist when I was at MIT. And, I've always been very driven by, the idea of giving back and having impact. And I thought that a professor was a good way of doing that. Then, living in university life, discovered that that might not be true. So I started really thinking about entrepreneurship, taking responsibility for technology transfer, making sure that what's cool in lab is, taken into the world and has impact. And I approached a professor at Harvard who had done about 22 billion worth of startups. And with a pitch, he had about 40 postdocs at the time looking to be professors. And I approached him, told him I wasn't interested, but I wanted to build a company. And started to do a kooky project on material science-based soft robots with him that we thought had commercial potential, and spun that out as a business called Soft Robotics. And that was supposed to be a medical device company. For a variety of reasons, the device worked, but the opportunity wasn't there for commercialization. We became a military surveillance company, and then all of a sudden we became a food packaging company, like you do. And so if you eat, Peeps around Easter or Domino's dough balls or, General Mills granola bars or whatever, you're probably using a robot hand that I designed for the food industry. And that was, by this point, maybe about 5 years ago. And that's kind of when I became a food roboticist. I was both surprised and frankly appalled by the lack of technology in our food systems, whether it be things that already exist in other industries that haven't been ported over to food, or kind of invention needed, but really plausible things that could be created. We had a food infrastructure that was very vulnerable, right? And we saw a lot of this during the pandemic. And I think it was a real wake-up call. And so started to build out a lot of infrastructure for that through Soft. And I guess at some point, from a mission-driven standpoint, I wanted to start making the food that kept you healthy and safe. And so I began a new company called Root AI that specialized in delivering robotic automation and artificial intelligence to a new form of durable farming infrastructure. They're enclosed glass environments that protect your farm from, really, really traumatic, unusual weather events like the ones we're going to see a lot soon. They can be built more sustainably, and they can create year-round production in countries where it's already very challenging to make food as it is, with the goal of allowing, nations around the world to actually relocalize their food supply and be protected against a very uncertain future that we're looking at. And that's actually what put me in the orbit of AppHarvest. I met the founder of AppHarvest in the Netherlands early 2018 when we both founded our companies. He was a green projects builder, a big solar infrastructure guy. And he was starting a greenhouse food production company here in the US, focused on delivering food to the East Coast. He needed a tech P&L to start selling technology products, and really with the goal of making this infrastructure kind of plug and play. And so I sold my business to AppHarvest and then took on the role of CTO, and we're now building out robotic solutions, enterprise cloud solutions, so farmers have like bread and butter good IT, as well as forms of artificial intelligence, specifically computer vision, to tighten up operations and turn a farm into what more resembles like an Amazon warehouse, like really just a well-oiled machine of production.
Really quite impressive. And as you said, it's really appalling that nobody has actually thought or done anything about it. And especially like, this is why MIT is magnificent. It really gets your eyes on things that are needed. Um, why is it relevant in terms of food security and sustainability? Like, why do you think like it's appalling that till now nobody has actually done anything in terms of like food security and sustainability?
Yeah, we just haven't been confronted with the problem yet, right? And it's one of these things where we're going to be very surprised very quickly. Over the course of my lifetime, we've lost 1/3 of the world's arable land. So that is in dwindling supply. We also have populations rising. So we're on a very fast vector to start feeling on a consistent basis as there's natural volatility in food production because it's exposed to the elements. We're going to start seeing, here and there shortages in markets. COVID gave us an early view on what that could look like. So that's a big part of it. And the other part of it is the current build out of our food infrastructure is that corporations abstract away being able to see the issues at the farm. You have farmers selling into wholesalers into retailers. It's the wholesaler's job to provide year-round continuity of supply, and they're getting it from different farms. The production from those farms is variable. Where that food's coming from over the years and the decades is shifting. So from the retailer's perspective at the top of the stack, it allows them to be blissfully unaware of how much things are changing on the farm. So that's kind of why there hasn't been the impetus to pursue this. There is now. And for me, why I started building this business was to a certain extent for my daughter. And I know that sounds sappy, but it was years ago, and I was looking at predictions on where was arable land to be found, and where were water resources shifting. And you start seeing that they leave the places where they used to be, and they enter into new places. And many of the nations of the world, their borders were drawn around the resources that they wanted to get. And I'm terrified of a world where everything you need from a resources standpoint to keep your people healthy and alive lives in your neighbor's field. Well, humanity's had one solution for that problem throughout time. And so long before sustainability becomes a key driver here, I think volatility in the food supply is going to create panic and instability and horrible outcomes. So the notion that we can start using technology and build food utilities where you can buy a piece of infrastructure that just like you build an electric power plant, and that has a steady, predictable output, and you can buy it in a formulation that's relevant to different climate zones. That's where we need to go. The industry is getting there, and I wanted to contribute effort against accelerating the process.
Wonderful. Building on that, where do you see the opportunities of applying such technology in harsh conditions like the Middle East? Because we're basically populated with a lot of desert areas. We have a lot of sunny days, a lot of arid. There's in some areas there's like scarcity of water. So where do you see and how do you see this technology being applied in this region?
Yeah, it's a tough one, but I would say that, working on it. So right now, the technology that we use is from the Netherlands. It's formulated for a Dutch use case. People have gotten it to work elsewhere, but there are now a bunch of companies working on, how to deploy it on the Arabian Peninsula, for example. So a greenhouse with reflective coatings for the near IR keeps the plants cool as opposed to warm. Using salt water for evaporative cooling allows you to take a resource that's in ready supply and cool down the facility. I made a venture investment through the company in a business out of KSA that is actually, amongst many things, developing rootstock that allows plants to actually grow on seawater as opposed to fresh water. There are solutions. It's a matter of putting in the work and having the focus and standing them up. But I would say that's in process. It's very exciting, and for a lot of places in the Middle East, it's where I'm seeing some of the most interesting technologies because the climate challenges are pronounced. And unfortunately for the whole world, a lot of our food growing regions are going to have a lot more climate characteristics of what you might find in Saudi Arabia. Sadly, for example, California year over year is starting to have more of those qualities of these hot and dry days with arid soil.
That's actually very true, because now we're seeing the effects of all the things we've done over the years. Can you talk to us more about the benefits of such technology? Like you said, you can build it in a greenhouse setting where you can actually avoid having or just being a victim, or not victim, being hands on to the region you're in. So can you talk more about the benefits of applying such a technology in these regions?
Exactly. So, right now, our first facility in Kentucky, it runs entirely on recycled rainwater. That may not be relevant everywhere because, Kentucky is a bit wet, but, just normal use case for this type of greenhouse hydroponic system where we're both delivering water directly to the roots and then also recapturing unused water. That already gets you to 90% less water used, where conventional agriculture is consuming right now about 70% of the world's fresh water supply. And so, even if you're not, using recycled rainwater to get that 10%, you can still go from 90%, 100% down to 10% by using directed delivery of water through hydroponics. You can also, in some places in the Middle East, the use case makes sense. So we use glass houses, so we get photons from the sun, and we don't need to invest money in as much artificial lighting or as much electricity. And that's the right tech mix for us to make this viable in a US context. But there's also an argument for full indoor farming in the Middle East in some places, where sure, you don't get free photons, you have to pay for your electricity. But the fact that you can build the buildings to be practically igloo coolers that you can keep, at lower temperatures, right? The higher the temperature gets from any crops, it applies stress, lowers productivity, and results in, just also crop disease when the crops are under stress. So there is a lot of potential applications for growing things like strawberries or lettuce in a fully enclosed environment with a lot of insulation from the sun.
So just to recap, you said we can decrease the water, you can avoid having the crops diseases, and then in terms of light and energy, you can also decrease that. So you can see there's a lot of benefits to be taken from there. And so let's talk about the challenges that you faced for to commercialize this technology.
Yeah, I mean, doing harvesting robotics is one of the major issues is getting capital markets to participate in the business. So, right now, even though there are really good businesses in agricultural technology, a lot of investors are not of a prepared mind to hear the pitch. They haven't developed a very, deep thesis in the area. So that's one of the issues right now. It's a double-edged sword. It means that if you are starting a new venture, you are dealing with the problem of, kind of just being the first mover, the bias against the first mover, being the one that supplies the education to the market. But from another perspective, if you're in private equity and you want to start acquiring assets and rolling them together, it does mean that there's a lot of tech companies out there with working technology that delivers meaningful value propositions for growers that have what are, in my opinion, very depressed valuations. So it's a good time actually to then take advantage of the lack of preparedness of capital markets, acquire those assets, and then roll them into organizations that have a broad product portfolio, either as a seller of technology or potentially more interesting, because our market's early and pretty fragmented, building vertically integrated growers with superior P&Ls.
Really quite impressive, Josh. Like as you said, like it's because they're unaware, it's a little bit risky for a lot of people in terms of like investments and all of that. But if you get it right, you can actually like be, as they say, avant-garde. Like you can set it up before anybody can actually see it happen. Um,
I mean, that's at the center of technology venture, was that if it was obvious to everyone that it was a good idea, you wouldn't have the opportunity to start it as a founder, right? And if it's a little bit implausible, well, typically transformative change only comes from implausible ideas. So from my perspective, it's fun. For others, maybe if you're a banker, a little spooky.
it's true. My last question before we move to the audience question is that how did COVID impact your work? Can you just give a highlight of that and then we'll move to the audience's questions?
Oh yeah. I mean, for better or worse, from a global concern about people, for us, it was an accelerant. We started closing contracts as a result of COVID. Started doing deployments for our technology at Root. It was ultimately the impetus for our acquisition, and I've been traveling the world throughout the entire pandemic from its beginning because people needed to have more streamlined and dynamic production. We even started getting phone calls from embassies around the world wondering if they could facilitate our international travel because they were standing up funds to actually either, pay for people to deploy first examples of enabling technology or to provide easy debt financing for producers to acquire it. So that was great. For my old company, Soft, if you remember a lot of articles about like chicken producing factories in the US going down because of a lack of workers, that's all of a sudden when my old sanitary gripper designs started getting installed at Tyson at the same facilities that were getting knocked out by COVID. And Tyson then subsequently invested in the company and created a partnership. So, from the perspective of being in the business of sanitary forms of automation around that was an accelerant. Also, when the economy is struggling, which it was then and it still is now, being able to invest in goods that always have a market, food always has a market, is one of the smarter investments you can make when investing in luxury handbags in a down market may not be the hot spot. You're at least going to sell some strawberries. So that's a biggie. Plus, also, as people are stuck at home, whether it be for COVID or just a down market, like let's say the housing crisis of '08, people who don't want to spend money on restaurants still don't want to have bad meals, and they typically start gravitating to higher quality fresh in their diet and more elaborate cooking. Again, we're sort of a anti-correlated asset class because we exist to mitigate crises. So crises create investment opportunity.
Is honestly wonderful to hear. Like you're one of the few people that actually brought the positive out of COVID. And as you said, in the end, people always want to eat, and it's food is at the basis of our living, and you're actually investing in that. We're gonna move into the questions of our audience. There's Dana that says your transition from academia to industry is very interesting. For someone who may be struggling to make the jump, what moment should one look before they realize their impact can be felt through industry?
As far as knowing whether or not you should enter into industry to have impact, geez, I've done a lot of looking before I leaped in my career. I would say that in general, if you're seeing that colleagues are joining well-funded corporations that are hiring and making material investments, it's a great sign. When you're in university life, and there are many facets of university life that I love, but even some of the best funded professors barely have research funds. And so if there are startups out there or big corporations that are giving your colleagues who graduated before you material budgets, you're going to have more impact because you need funding and people and infrastructure to do good work. It's a personal choice, but for me, it's been a lot more fulfilling.
Thank you. There's Daria that's asking hydroponic and indoor farming usage currently is geared more towards short term crops like leafy greens and tomatoes. Do you think such techniques or agricultural technology can be applied to other types of agriculture like fruit yielding trees?
So you can do greenhouse for tree crops. Right now it's early days. I was seeing some data on cherry production where they were doing greenhouse cherry production on several continents to test out the concept. For trees that should have come into harvesting maturity in 3 years, they were coming in 2 years. Pack out yields were higher because you can actually really finesse the balance of the plant, vegetative versus generative growth. And pack out rates were through the roof because you didn't have fruits that were scarred by hail or windstorms. So right now, from a plant perspective, the plants are a lot more productive per acre. It remains to be seen what variant of greenhouse technology is the right one to make it economically viable. But heck, for tree crop, there's probably a really solid use case already to do like retractable, poly cover, basically plastic sheet cover, just for a little bit more finesse control over the environmental conditions. But it is an active area of research. I think it's probably going to be another 3 years before there's more substantiated data.
Thank you. The other question is what are some prerequisites that need to be in the country you enter? For example, regulations, awareness, social pressures.
I would say that, what's really, really helpful is if there are sovereign wealth funds in a country that are looking to do big infrastructure projects, that's very positive. I would say the power supply is a big one, like being able to have a substantial electrical system is relevant for these kinds of technologies. And then beyond that, being able to line up the logistics for your offtake agreement with a regional retailer that can do the trucking logistics, marketing, and sale of the product. Beyond that, you're good to go because what exists within the four walls of your facility bears uncanny resemblance to what would be within those walls if you're in the Netherlands or South Africa or Australia. It's really the ecosystem around it as far as power, logistics, and cash.
Tasneem is asking, she's like, I'm very interested in robotics, the robotics industry, but not sure where to start. How did you enter robotics field and what led you to incorporate that knowledge and technology with the food industry rather than other more obvious industries like transportation and military, etc.?
Yeah, so for food, what I was seeing was that the pick and place problem in agriculture was the same problem as warehouse with a higher tolerance for error. You can drop 3% of your produce on the ground while harvesting it and no one cares. you're not allowed to damage, 1 out of every 10,000 boxes at Amazon. So very similar technology stack, and in reality, a lower barrier to being successful in ag. So that's what drew me there. As far as getting into the industry, likely reconnecting actually with the MIT network is interesting. Boston right now is in the era of the new kinds of robotics. Like since the 60s, we've had robotic arms in factories, and that's not where I would say a lot of the exciting opportunities are. Boston is one of the big hubs where we're standing up, mobile robots for warehouse applications with tons of situational awareness as machines. We've had some recent successes here, obviously Kiva and Six River and a few others. So reconnecting with the MIT network has actually been a phenomenal resource for me. Actually, just as a small pitch, I mentor tons of entrepreneurs. And I'm Boston based. So if you have colleagues who are looking to chat with a fellow founder, entrepreneur for advice more broadly in robotics, logistics, artificial intelligence, and enterprise B2B solutions, please, you can shoot them my email. I love chatting with founders, still mentor through the university.
That's wonderful. Definitely going to share your contacts for anybody that's interested. The last question we have is, how do you think about managing disease within growing environments? Is the risk higher when growing single type crops in one environment?
So certainly monocultures leave you exposed to disease. Most of ag is monoculture anyway, so it's something you have to be cognizant of. One nice tool that we have in greenhouse is we can use a beneficial insect strategy, and that instead of pesticides, we actually deploy often good bugs that kill bad bugs, or bugs that might eat away dead or diseased tissue from plants. That allows us to use substantially less chemicals. So I think that we have an advantage there for sure. Actually, just to hop back to the previous question you asked, as far as how to get into robotics, my other recommendation, just email people shamelessly. Probably one of my first intros into agricultural robotics when I was working at Soft was there was an interesting guy building autonomous tractors, and Wall Street Journal wrote about him, read the article, figured, heck, I should talk to him next, and figured out a way to get his email address. Sure enough, he was crazy enough to answer. You'd be surprised. People put their heart and souls into these machines and into this industry. They are more than happy to tell you about their life's work. They would invite the opportunity. So just start pinging people.
That's wonderful advice. Josh, honestly, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for giving us a little bit of your time and to tell us a little bit about your technology. We're in awe of it. And we can't wait to see what you're going to bring next. Like, I think you have a long line of robotics that you're going to integrate into the food industry, and we're hopefully going to see them close to the region very, very soon.